Okay, I think I just figured something out.
Okay. Oh yeah, yeah. And Joy just reminded me. We didn't mention for maybe 4 or 5 years, I've been doing pots for the city of Brevard, and I do all of the pots within the main corridors, Main Street and Front and Broad, and Jordan Street too, for like the heart of Brevard and the city. Thank you. We've started a year-round program with them, and so you'll see some of those pots in here. And then also for probably close to a decade, we have worked with them. I've worked with the music center, and while the volunteers for the beautification committee are the ones who actually do the planting out there, I get to help them plan it and find the plants for them, and I love doing that. So I have a lot of experience with putting pots together that have not worked, that the deer have eaten, that people have thrown up in, that, it all has happened. I've seen it. And I say that because it was a first a couple weeks ago in a pot. And I wear disposable gloves when I garden in town, so you'll see why. Okay, let's see if I can get on track here. Now.
She has those big, long fingernails, too.
I have dirty fingernails, actually, and dirty toenails. So don't anybody look. Let's see where we're at here. So, like I said, we're going to talk about the basics of container gardening, like both what you need to know, what you need, and then how to take care of them. The first thing you need to know is that you can container garden just about anywhere, okay? In fact, container gardens can give you space to garden where you wouldn't be able to otherwise. So it really does broaden where you can put plants. You really only need to know a few simple things. And this is perhaps the best place to start, the spot. Okay, yeah. Steve's on it. Sometimes the best place to yes. We'll talk about these later. Yeah, table's a little hot. I can move whatever you need there too. Sometimes this is the best place to start, the spot, where your pot is going. Oh, is it going to be at your front door, at your entryway, on your patio, your porch, under a window, on a walkway in a garden? Your spot is usually where you start. But whatever your spot, you probably can have a container garden there. Knowing the spot will help you pick the right plants, and that's the most important part of this whole thing. Once you have your spot, the pot is the one requirement, and I know there are so many people who know gardens in here who drainage. Who said that? Yes, that is the one requirement of all planting pots. If it does not have a drain hole, then it's a water garden. Okay, and there's lots of water garden container ideas that I could share with you, but we're going to stick with the ones with the drainage holes today. And after you have your spot and your pot, there are a few other components that you need to really have a successful planting situation. And one of the first ones that I would think of is potting soil. Soil is so important, and it's more important in the pots than it would be in the ground, because your root systems in pots are confined to one area, where in the ground they would have the ability to like extend beyond where there's rocks or chunks and move around. So soil is so important, and it's not garden soil that you're using. It's not compost. If it doesn't say container mix or potting soil, it is not for a pot. So don't really resist buying the inexpensive garden soil to put in your pots. It doesn't drain the right way. It doesn't have the right components to make your plants grow healthy. Always use a potting soil. These are three of my favorites. If you came to my barn right now, they all three would be in there, and I've been kind of hoarding them because it's the last of my supply. But that red bag of Fafford is the go-to potting soil, in my opinion. I have been using it for more than 30 years. It's a newer formulation now. But Fafford makes a premium potting soil. It has a 3-month extended feed in it, so you don't have to worry about fertilizing very often.
Where can I find that now that your shop is closed?
Henderson's has Fafford, and they also have, they don't have the Sea and Farm, I think, but they have Ocean Forest, which is basically the same thing from Fox Farm. Henderson's. And I think Raymond's has Fafford too. Yeah.
Pretty sure Ace Hardware carries some of the Daddy Pete's.
And Sundays has started carrying some of the Daddy Pete's too. I'm not sure what Jake has in stock, but I bet if you said, I'll buy Sea and Farm from you, he would get it. Oh, do? Good. Excellent. Sunday's Gardens on Old Hendersonville Highway. Yeah. So soil, start there. Get good soil. Don't skimp out on it. You don't have to replace your soil every season. You just have to refresh it. So keep that in mind. Like it's kind of like when you're planting a shrub in your garden, you're going to amend the soil with $10 of, soil amendment, and it's worth it. And that is the same, I would have the same opinion about potting soil. Spend a little bit more and have good quality soil.
How often do you amend?
I amend every season that I plant. So if you're doing year-round container gardening, when you pull out your plants at the end of the season, you would just dig in and around and put soil back in and then plant that way. When I'm changing out the whole thing, I'll get root mass and everything out and replace that way too. All right, so we talked about soil. Let's go to the next thing that you need to know for container gardening. You need to know how much light you're getting. You don't have to have full sun to have a container. You can have any light situation, full, morning sun, morning shade, afternoon sun, dappled light, dark shade under an overhang. You can even have plants in that situation, but you need to have that information in hand when you're going to pick out your plants for your containers. And then the last thing you need to know about is watering. Let's see if that works. Oh, it went away. It went too far. Along with your sun, your container gardens are going to need water. And even if they're out in the rain, they are going to need you to supplement water from time to time. On average, it's like your other plants, you need about 1 inch a week to keep things watered the right way. So that's a good guideline. But pots dry out faster because you tend to have more foliage over the root mass. So when it rains, water falls off. So don't count on the rain showers to water your pots, especially in the summer when they're all full, because a lot of that rainwater is not getting in there.
The sun heats up the pot, which makes it better.
Right, and your root mass is much more condensed. So the more it grows, the more you're going to need to check it for water. Stick your finger. That is the best moisture meter on the planet, right there. And that is what I tend to do. Once you get to know your pots, you can recognize when they're just starting to dry out before the soil starts to pull away from the edges. You don't want it to go that far, but if you learn to recognize that when you're maintaining your pots, then you'll know, oh, I need to water this today. But your finger, 3 inches down, as far as you can feel down in there. If it's dry, 2 or 3 inches down, it's time to water. If it's damp, wait till the next day. And that's another thing that I should point out too, is water requirements are different for each plant. But you have more leeway in a pot because if you're using good potting soil and a pot with a drain hole, then you got the perfect drainage. So there are lots more plants that will take that situation. So you can put a lavender and a coleus in the same pot, and they both thrive. When in the ground, they would like different conditions. You can't push it all the way, but you can get by with more that way. And just one more note on watering. You can water with a watering can. If you do, use the shower head. That is going to be low and slow, and it sits on the surface and goes in slowly into the soil, and that's how you get better absorption. Watering wands are also really, really handy. In town, this is what I use most of the time because there's not running water a lot of places. But this is if you've got a lot to water around your house or your garden. This is another really great investment, the Dram water wands. All right, so I'm going to move that so you can see too, and we'll go to the last part to consider and things that you need to know is that all containers are going to need some level of maintenance. There's no maintenance-free gardens. You guys know that. There's no maintenance-free containers. But the cool thing is container gardening maintenance is easy, and once you get the hang of it, it really doesn't take a whole lot of time. It's just a matter of getting into the habit of doing it. So things like feeding, we talked about the Fafford having the slow release fertilizer in it. When you're watering a lot, nutrition gets pushed out of the soil real fast. So it's good to liquid feed or even put slow release fertilizer in your pots throughout the summer when you're watering to keep them blooming and growing and looking great. And then deadheading and pruning are also a consideration to keep your plants blooming their best. A lot of times deadheading is the key to that. And if something just looks weird or ratty when your pot is growing in, cut it out. If you're doing a mixed pot, then, well, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. If you're doing a mixed pot and in the summer one of your calibrachoas fail, cut it back, pull it out. You can replace it with another calibrachoa, or you can take a little garden statue and stick it in the edge of your pot and hide that hole till everything else covers up. I have little foxes in my spring pots because I didn't get everything planted exactly right, and I stuck those in. I love little ornaments like that. You can use like small gazing globes or whatever, but that's a really great little way. You have company coming, you forgot to water your pot last week, half of it's dead. What can I do? Your little garden charms. So if you do keep, use good soil, pick out the right pot, pick out the right plant, provide it water, and give it a little maintenance here and there, you can actually container garden anywhere. Just like it's not my favorite, it's not the most beautiful, but this person loves geraniums, and they have a geranium collection, and that is completely acceptable container gardening to me. And if you look hard enough, I don't know what that line is in the middle. What that is. But there are irrigation lines, drip, go into the pots. Geraniums are the perfect plant for this situation. They like it hot and dry. And when you water them too much, they melt. So this is the perfect spot for a geranium collection. So in saying that you can container garden everywhere, you can container garden everywhere. I have to throw those in. You can container garden on a boat, in a boat. It's a little Dr. Seuss-like. On an RV, in an RV. That one seemed more applicable to us. But you can container garden anywhere. You just have to provide the right components and maintenance. So now that you have your spot, you have your pot, and you know how to take care of it. You know how much light your plants are going to get, where your pot's going. You've picked out a good potting soil. You're ready to go pick out some plants, right? All right. So I have one more set of guidelines or a concept to share with you that will help you when you're picking plants out for your planters. And this is something that a lot of you have heard before, but it works, and that's why you should use it. It's the Thriller Filler Spiller. Everybody's heard of this, right? Yep. Okay. No? Yay! I call them a pot virgin, container garden virgins. And honestly, there are really no hard rules. That's what I've been trying to explain the whole time. There are no hard rules to gardening or container gardening. But if you use the Thriller, Filler, Spiller concept, you are very likely to have great success. And so we're going to talk about that just a little bit. I did not come up with this. Everybody knows it. And if you look at, I actually ended up in a rabbit hole trying to figure out if Christopher Lloyd really did come up with this the other night. And I'm a garden geek like that. So I never got an answer. And who knows? But I've always given Christopher Lloyd, the English garden designer, credit for this Thriller, Filler, Spiller concept. But like I said, it works, so everybody uses it. Everybody takes credit for it too. Not me. So we'll start with the Thriller. The Thriller is where you should start in your pot. It is the vertical element or the drama or the big bang in your pot. And so in this diagram, Angelonia is the Thriller. This is Angelonia for the Music Center, Cindy. But Angelonia gets nice and big, blooms all summer long. You hardly ever have to deadhead it, and the deer don't eat it wherever the wood is. Yeah. Yeah, I say that because I have seen it in uses like the entrance of Conisty and places like that, and it not get devoured.
They don't eat it at Coniston.
They don't. That's right. Angelonia. Some people call this summer snapdragon, and it comes in a variety of colors. This is a blue and white bicolor, but there's pinks. I was shopping at a garden center in Charlotte a couple weeks ago and saw a black one. I did not buy it, but I saw it. But there are lots of new cool colors of this coming out. And there are also spreading forms that they're introducing now. But the old-fashioned angel face and Sarita are nice, tall varieties of Angelonia.
That's what it's on.
Pardon?
Sun?
Sun, yes, full sun. This is another one of my, oh, yes, ma'am.
AI says that Steve Silk in Fine Gardening in 1997 came up with the term Thriller, Filler, Spiller.
Okay, thank you.
Another AI came up with Piet Oldhoff, Ouldof. So
I know it's not him, so that AI's wrong. That one sounds a little right. But,
It didn't originate the concept, but he popularized the term.
okay, yeah. I think that's what I kept going. I just kept seeing other names. And like I said, Christopher Lloyd's who always stuck out with me with that one. So anyway, back to the Thrillers. This does not have a flower on it, so to speak, but this is one of the coolest Thrillers you can use in a pot in the summertime. This is called Prince Tut Papyrus, and it is a tropical plant. It will not survive the winter, but golly, it's worth it. It doesn't look like much now, but these little heads will get this big. And I don't have the picture with me, but I had it in a pot downtown last year, and by the end of the summer, it was as tall as me, which is really cool and showy. It's called Prince Tut Papyrus. Yeah, Tut. Yeah. Papyrus, yeah. And it's actually a sapyrus, so, but Prince Tut. There are a couple other versions, small and large. And then for shade, one of my favorite Thrillers is going to be Caladium. Caladiums are great. I love tropical foliage for Thrillers, not always flowers. So Caladiums are great for shade. Bananas are wonderful in pots. The picture of the canna here, I love cannas in pots, even if they didn't have a flower on them all summer. And then another favorite that goes along with the Prince Tut is ornamental grasses of all kinds. Ornamental grasses are even effective after they go dormant. That middle picture is from my deck a couple years ago. I love the color and texture of dormant grass in pots in the wintertime, so I tend to leave those. And then the second element in this recipe is a filler. Fillers are exactly that. They're the middle ground of the pot. They connect the thriller, they connect the spiller, they add balance into the pots. They tend to be rounded or mounding in shape, and they, again, can be foliage or flower or both. And for fillers, I have this Bossa Nova begonia. I love this one. It's not going to get giant like the dragon wings, so it's suitable for a filler. Dragon wings are suitable for a thriller. And this will just fill in and grow moundy on the side of a pot. Geraniums work great. Lantana is a wonderful filler in the full sun. And this is another one of my favorites. This one is actually called Breathless Euphorbia or Spurge. There's another one called Diamond Frost. These guys just fill in the gaps and show themselves just beautiful all summer. Little delicate white flowers. It just flowers more and more as the summer goes. The hotter it gets, the better it looks. And it really is one of the best fillers. And that will cue me to say that white flowers always work in containers to kind of tie everything together and to help other plants pop. So if something's not working when you're laying out your container, try a little white. This one is my favorite for sun. This one is Euphorbia. It's Diamond Frost or Breathless are my two favorites. And then if you're in a shady situation, tuberous begonias, splash plants, the hypoestes, and in part sun to shade, this is probably my number one pot plant that I use is coral bells. Coral bells, heuchera. And I know everybody gets so disappointed with heuchera. Don't plant it in the ground. Plant it in a pot. They don't like our soil. They don't like our humidity. But if you give them a pot and good drainage and a part sun spot, they're going to thrive. And if you don't believe me, they're in the video or in the slides a little later, you'll see one. But I have had pots downtown in part sun situations, not shade, where I planted a 1-gallon coral bells, and I've had it in the pot for at least 3 years. And they just look great year round. They're this big. And I keep those pots on the drier side because it's just the way things work. They like that environment. So grow the coral bells in a pot. If you want it in your garden, put it in a pot and put the pot in the garden. Really. They do, and that is part of the reason that they don't work good in our soil too, because after a while you have to maintain them. When you're doing container gardening year-round, you're swapping those plants out every season anyway, and so a coral bell that's going to stay in a pot, you're going to lift it out, play with its roots a little bit, clean it up, and you're going to plant it back at the right level. It'll keep trying to crawl out of the pot, but you have more control over it that way. Yes, you do. And crawling out of the pot is a really good way to describe it. So fillers are fun, and I sometimes end up picking those first because I like euphorbia and coral bells and stuff. But they really do tie all the other stuff together. And then the last component, actually, we talked about diamond frost, begonias. The other one I will mention are coral bells. That orangey gold plant in the middle is a snap teeny miniature snapdragon. That is a wonderful, and I think that one's called, it's an orange sunshine or something like that. There's a lot of different colors in that. I put that up there because I want you to know about those little snapdragons. They have their season. It is not the summer. Fall and spring are when those snapdragons are going to look good. In the winter, they're going to look terrible in your pots, but I'm going to show you a strategy for hiding that. They will survive. Just leave them in there and let them come back in the spring, and they'll do this. This is the spring before last at my house, and that was a 4-inch pot I planted in September, and that was, I think that picture's in March, and it was solid covered with blooms, and it bloomed for a long, long time. So I would say Sundays, Raymond's, any of those. The Snap Teeny is a series that's short, and then there's one called, I lost it. Most of the ones that you're going to find in the garden centers are shorter varieties now. If you stay away, there's always one called Rocket. Rocket gets super tall. If you want that for your garden and cutting, that's great. But any of the other ones are going to stay short. And then the spiller's the last component in this. And in this picture, that's going to be sweet potato vine. Yeah. I have a note about sweet potato vine, okay? Don't use a regular old-fashioned sweet potato vine in your pot unless you want it to eat your yard, because that's what they do. You know how big they get. Y'all all have grown those things. Right. They go up, they go out. They're a great ground cover. But this sweet potato vine is a new variety, and lots of the new varieties are compact. And in the ground, they would make a little mound, but in pots, they're going to spill over the side. But they're not going indefinitely. You don't have to trim them every week. They stay compact. So, and that being said, that's another one of those things. If it gets leggy and looks awful, cut it back. It'll come back. So, sweet potatoes? Or sweet potato vine? Yeah. There are some beetles that eat them. It's usually that, there's this little gold beetle that I always see on them. I don't know the name of. And Japanese beetles will eat them. Slugs, yeah. I don't know of an animal that eats them, but I'm sure deer do. Rabbits and deer. Yeah, and voles. Yeah, everything eats them. That's the answer. Yeah, it's right. And that is something to consider too. I haven't mentioned that. But where you guys that are in Conisty or Glen Canyon that have the deer issues, container gardening is your answer to have what you want and to keep the critters away. You just have to do it on your deck. I mean, or rooftop. I mean, you just have to plant where they can't get to. Yeah, or spray them. But that doesn't, I mean, sometimes the deer are like, you sprayed that for me, right? Yeah. So,
We share the same deer. I don't have a deer music center.
oh, yes. Music center deer are fun, too. All right. So, let's see, where else?
Question.
Okay.
Snaptina. In the summertime, what do you do with it then?
So, I usually would pull it out, and I might put it in another pot because it will survive the summer, but it is like a pansy. Pansies get stretched out and ugly when it gets hot. That's what all those early things do. Pansies, snapdragons, and dianthus are all that. They'll all survive the summer, but they look terrible. You can leave them in your pots by just cutting them back really close to the ground or to the pot and leaving a little green, and then plant around them, or you can pop them out and, stick them in a pot that's not in your, eye view for a while. I tend to leave those, not always pansies. I just pull pansies out and go. But dianthus and snapdragons, I'll just chop them back a little bit and plant something on top of them. And then in September, you start to see them coming up when the other stuff's dying back. Yeah. Yeah. And then we'll talk a little bit about some more spillers too. So in this pot on your left, that silvery cascade coming out of that pot is one of my favorite perennial spillers. It is an artemisia or a wormwood, and it's called silver brocade. It's almost evergreen. So it's effective in a pot 9 months a year, which is pretty impressive. And if it looks ugly, you cut it back, it comes right back. It doesn't really have a flower to speak of, but man, it makes the show just with that nice, intense, like coarse foliage. And then Calibrachoa is another really common, really great spiller. Every color of the rainbow almost, and all kinds of variations. I get so excited when I see all the multicolored ones. I want one of all of them. But that's a really common one. It blooms without deadheading it, but they do get leggy in the summer. Again, chop them back. Don't be scared. Calibrachoa. Yeah, it's also called million bells or mini petunias. They have all these fun names for them, but Calibrachoa is how I know it. And this will shock you guys. I'm going to go ahead and show you how I would prune one of these back because I can do it. I know where this one's going in my pot, so I'll sacrifice to show you. But when something gets a little leggy and it's looking ugly and it's like growing in the side of the pot, let's do it this way. I will come in and bunch the whole thing up like this. I know that makes everybody sad, but that plant is going to come back gangbusters. Instead of looking all wiry like it did, it'll look like that in another week or 10 days. It's just like your hair. It'll grow back. Yeah. While I'm over here with the spillers, yes, ma'am.
I have a pot of pansies that I bought, just pansies.
Uh-huh.
They've already stopped blooming.
Uh-huh.
Can I bring them inside for the summer and put them like in a sunroom
Nope.
and chop them back, or?
Chop them back and leave them in the shade somewhere outside.
Okay.
Yeah, leave them in the coolest place you have outside would be what I would say. And just let them do their thing. This is another filler that I have to tell you guys about because and you guys can see, like, I love foliage as much as I love flowers. So I do think they're as effective as flowers in pots and sometimes even more. So this is a type of Joseph's coat. It's Alternanthera Little Ruby, and it is a spiller. Most of there's one called Chartreuse Threads. That's a little mounder. It's a great filler in a pot. This one is a great spiller. And the combination of the dark and light is always a winner in a pot. Love this. And this, again, goes back to the white in a pot and what it'll do. This one's called Little Ruby Alternanthera, or Joseph's coat. Little Ruby Joseph's coat. And then this is Bacopa. It's another one of our standard, easy to care for spillers. And then in the middle here is Fanflower. That's another one. You'll see it in hanging baskets a lot, but I hardly ever see it in a mixed pot. And you should be using it in a mixed pot. Look how pretty that looks. And it comes in a variety of colors too. I typically see it in this blue, but now there are hot pinks, whites, and light pinks too. It's gorgeous, yeah. I'm really liking the pinks and oranges this year for some reason. So I have the pansy picture here because in the winter, or fall through winter, when you take out all your summer annuals, it is hard sometimes to find a spiller for your pot. And because it's not hard, fast rules, it's okay to go without one. But eventually that pansy will do it for you if you let it get leggy enough. That's when I'm like, okay, yeah, it's time to cut them back. But they're spilling over my pots. So I'm showing you this because this is an excellent example of combining thriller, filler, and spiller with multiple plants in a giant pot and making a huge impact. And there's perennials, annuals, all of it in that same pot, grasses. This one? It's a sedum. It's, yeah. It looks like it might be like Vera Jameson or something like that, one of the Rambler ones. And then it's good to note that typically your garden centers are going to have their best variety of color and selection for your pots now, this time of year. This is the week, actually. Actually, last week was the week because it's Mother's Day week. But you won't find a better selection than you will now. So now's the time to go get your summer annual color and start those pots up. But it's also good to remember that when something looks cruddy in your pot and you're cutting it back and putting your bird statue there, if you want to replace it with something that's in season at the garden center. Use one of those perennials that catches your eye, like a coneflower for the summer. Or I love putting columbine in the pots in the spring because you can really enjoy that bloom that you saw and it lured you to in the garden center. And then it goes into your garden the next season when you change your pots out. So if you don't know where to start and you don't know or you don't trust yourself in picking out plants, ask those people who work at the garden centers because they take care of those plants every day. They know what likes water 4 times a day. They know that what will die if you water it every day. So ask them. They're the ones that know about growing in pots. Okay? And then let's see where we're at now. So let's talk about planting seasonally. All the things that I'm showing you now are summer color plants. Everything that I have here is stuff that you would use in the pots this time of year, in the late spring, and it'll last through fall. And that is generally where people have stopped container gardening. They plant for this season. The frost hits in the fall. They cut their pots back, empty them, and tug them into the storage shed for the winter. But you don't have to do that. You can garden year-round here. You need to consider using pots that are frost resistant. The glazed pots like in this picture, any pots that y'all bought at New Leaf would have been frost resistant if they were made for outdoors. And that is a good place to start. But you can keep stuff in those pots year round. The one key to keeping your pots from cracking in the winter is having no standing water in those pots. You want them to drain. So keep an eye on that. Sometimes roots clog holes. If water's standing in there, it will surely crack when the water freezes. So make sure your pots are always draining. So we'll talk a bit about seasonal planting. I mentioned you can get any color of the rainbow. Now, these are all summer pots. The one on the far left is for shade, but Angelonia, that's that compact sweet potato vine. I threw that in there because you can see how compact it stays. And, Calibrachoa, all the begonias, that's all the summer stuff. And you keep going with this through usually September. These are also some summer pots. The one on the far left is actually Russian sage, autumn joy sedum, and lotus vine. And that is in the hottest place in town. you know, Maureen. But you have lots of options for color, I think is my point with this in the summer. Then as you move into the fall, what I suggest is in early September, early to mid-September, if you are planning to plant your pots for the fall, that's when you start thinking about it. You need to start swapping out those worn out summer annuals, like your Angelonia in September will be tired. Your petunias will be done. Pull those out, put in your pansies, snapdragons, dianthus. Use mustards and kales and Swiss chard. Use herbs that are evergreen. You can use rosemary in pots year round. Sage, parsley even lasts for most of the winter. So use those. And spurge, that's another one in that middle pot you'll see show up a little bit. That's Ascot rainbow spurge. In the fall, that's when I always go for the coral bells first. So coral bells, ornamental grasses, those are great for fall through spring and really year round if you think about it. Let's see, there was something I wanted to show you in this planter and I didn't write it down on my notes. Okay, move on. More examples of what we use in fall planting. So for your thriller in the fall, think of using evergreens, especially if you want to add a new hinoki cypress to your garden. Use it in your pot for a season or 3, and let your evergreens be the showpiece in the wintertime. So conifers, broadleaf evergreens, the one in the middle is an oddball mahonia, but camellias work great in the right pots. Boxwood is a great plant for a pot. Think about your evergreens when you're planting for your fall and winter. And then the other plants that are my go-tos are, again, the coral bells for year-round. And autumn fern is another one that stays mostly evergreen, and it is great in a pot. You'll see that, I think, in a minute, too. All right. And so in the fall, when you're planting those pansies and you're swapping out your pots from getting rid of the summer stuff, putting in the fall and winter stuff, that's when you need to think about planting bulbs in your pots too. September is typically a little early. So if you want to plant bulbs in your pots, wait a little later. Your pansies won't get quite as big before it gets cold, but it's okay because you got bulbs in there. But bulbs, it's really, you can plant any bulb in a pot, just about. I think it's important to layer them. The thing that is the best piece of advice for bulbs that I can give you in pots is use a lot of them. You cannot use 5 tulip bulbs in a 20-inch pot and think it's going to look good, because you got to remember, each bulb is going to give you 1 flower. So you need to use a dozen tulip bulbs in a 12-inch pot. Cram them in. They should just be touching. And so this pot with the tulips in it, there are about 12 or 15 tulip bulbs in there, and they're kind of stacked on each other, really. Just as long as the points are up, that's all they need. And then the hyacinth that's in there is planted in a solid ring right on top of the tulips. Because they'll mingle in a pot and they're not going to stay there forever. They won't. Tulips are 1 year. Tulips are annuals. Yeah. And there are some that will slowly fade over 5 years in your garden, but you really should just use them as, most of the time I'll use them in a pot like this, or I'll use them as cut flower. I'll grow them, and as soon as they start to bud, I'll pull the whole plant out of the ground and I'll use it inside, because that's how they last the longest and they look the best. And I don't have patience for ugly tulips in my garden. It makes me sad that they don't thrive. So I'm going to use narcissus, hyacinths, and then fritillaria, this little checkered lily. Nobody ever uses those, and they're adorable. Yeah. And in a pot, they're really cute because they get up just a little bit higher to see. They're great. They do. They do. They bloom fairly late, and they aren't like super prolific, but gosh, if you put 7 or 10 in a pot, it's going to make a good show. But in pots. If it doesn't grow well in the ground, you always have to try it in a pot. So plant your bulbs with your plants. Put your pansies right on top of them. Any herbaceous plant like dianthus or snapdragons or ornamental grasses that you might plant in the pot with the bulbs, just plant them right on top. Those bulbs are going to find their way through those root balls and come up and do fine. The one exception is if you're putting an evergreen in that pot, don't put the bulbs under the root ball of the evergreen. It'll end up too deep in the pot, and they just can't compete. So I tend to put the evergreen in and set it and still have like this much soil exposed around the root ball, set my bulbs, and then layer the rest of my plants in when I'm doing that. And then we'll move to winter. Ooh, I've been talking for a while. In early winter, I'll start thinking about decorating for the holidays. This is probably my favorite part of pots, or it has become, because I love the smell of cut greens and winterberry. I just love all of that. So you can take your Christmas decorating to your pots or your holiday decorating to your pots, and they look beautiful through the whole holiday season and on through the winter. So birch branches are my thriller in these pots. Birch branches can be an investment if you're buying them for your holiday decorating, but you can save them for several years. They keep their color really well. I keep mine in the back of the barn, but storage shed, a basement, somewhere that they're, cool and dry. Buy yourself some white birch, and then you can use those for a couple Christmases. And then winterberry, holly, cypress, pine, fir, anything that you could, make a wreath out of, actually, or nandina if you have it in your yard. You can cut all that and just stick it in your pots. The cool weather keeps them nice and green for a long time. You don't have to water it really while you're doing that. And you can do it right on top of the plants. You don't want any evergreen kind of plant like a coral bell. I would not want to cover it up with the greens. Just work around it. I think I have a picture of that too. Yes.
Are you putting the cut branches in the soil?
Yep, just jamming them right down there in the soil. Jam it and cram it. Those are terms that we use quite often with the pots. So here's some good examples of that, like the pot on the far left. That is completely full of greens, but tucked down in there are some pansies that were looking really puny, and they actually did survive all this, and they came back in the spring. And then this is a different season in the middle with the same pot where I used coral bells and ornamental evergreen grasses and pansies, and then just used the red twig dogwood with the same effect. Yeah, they do. And almost always the red and yellow twig dogwoods sprout. They grow roots in those pots, and you can stick them in your garden or leave them in the pot. I've done that in Matt's pot at the brown bean before, where they all rooted and I just left them for the summer and pulled them out. Yeah. But in this pot here, that's from Lucy Clark's gallery. That is a really good example of using autumn fern in a pot and then sticking greens in around it for the holiday. It stayed like that all through the holidays, and in January we pulled those greens out. And the plants are fine, and they look good throughout the season that way. And then, so once your holiday greens are ready to come out, then that's when we start to move into that early season stuff again. If you use hellebores in your pots, when you pull the Christmas greens out, those little things are going to take off and bloom, and they give you winter color when nothing else would. Again, with the coral bells. It's the best plant for a pot. But these are examples of early spring pots where we've added some bulbs in for a little early spring bloom. The one on the far left, that grass in the back, is one called Feather Falls. That is an excellent grass to give you that spiller effect in the wintertime. It stays evergreen, and it is a prolific grower. But that pot on the left also has, like I mentioned, the columbine in the spring. There was a big hole there, and I'm reluctant to stick statues in the pots downtown. So I stuck a columbine in there for the season, and it bloomed for a month, and now it has gone home to live in the garden, and it's got, summer annuals replacing it. But you always just need to be willing to zhuzh and yank and, know when something's reached its limit, and, give it some grace. Say you go, and we'll get you something new. So these are early spring pots from that. And I'll also point out that black mondo grass. You can't use that in a landscape bed anywhere and see it. worth anything, but in a pot, you can see it. So I'm just going to show you a few more pictures of my seasonal pots. These are the same group of pots, September, December, and April on my patio or my deck. You can see I pulled the bulbs in there. I have that mustard that's on this right side that survived the winter on my 20-foot off the ground deck. And you can see in the middle picture, Ascot Rainbow. That's an excellent plant for winter pots, and the orange winterberry holly. And this is one that I'm going to show you too. We were talking about coral bells creeping out of pots, getting crazy, not doing well in the ground. That golden one right there, that is Autumn Bride. If you have had no success with coral bells or heuchera, go buy that plant. It will do okay in the ground. Autumn Bride. It's Heuchera villosa, and villosa is our native species here, and that's really important when you're buying heuchera. The closer you can get to that villosa parentage, the better they're going to do for you, or that's been my experience. But Autumn Bride, I planted that. That is in a pot that is, let's say, 24 inches in diameter. I planted that in 2020 in March with a bunch of other random little coral bells that I had left over from the winter or whatever. And they hung out for the season. And some of the coral bells did okay, but Autumn Bride went crazy, okay? And she started creeping and crawling out that pot. But I left her in the pot for 5 years total. I did replant and pull apart. And finally, this spring, we've taken her out of that pot, and I got at least a dozen babies when I took it apart. But that Autumn Bride there, that picture is from late August or early September last summer. And it gets a little hit of direct sun at the wrong time of day, but I keep it watered. But it's in indirect light all day. That one coral bells is this big around. It is fantastic. And I have actually had it in my old garden and grew it for more than 10 years without any incident. Just it stayed in its spot. So if you have trouble with coral bells, give that one a try, and it might change your mind about them. Yes.
Before you advance slides, what's the little white flower in the foreground on that right side?
It is. It's the diamond frost euphorbia. Yep. And then the other side of those steps, where those pots are, yucca is another one that I've used in a pot long term, and it's been a great thriller. Oh, gosh, yes.
In some of these really tall pots,
Uh-huh.
is it appropriate or okay and what kind, if any, kind of filler to put at the bottom, or do we just invest in a whole bunch of pots?
It is best to fill the whole thing with soil. It doesn't have to be fresh potting soil. It doesn't have to be faffered all the way down in a tall pot. But you need to stay away from using gravel or pottery shards in the bottom of the pots. It changes the water column. It's an old wives' tale. It improves drainage. It makes your drainage better, but it actually does the exact opposite. It changes the water column because of the unevenness of the bottom layer, and it makes all the water kind of spread out and sit down at the bottom of the root ball, where if you just use soil to the bottom, all the water will channel right into the hole, the drainage hole, so you get that perfect drainage that a pot will give you. So, Pardon? Yes, you can use a screen. In a pinch, I've used a paper towel in the bottom of a pot to cover the hole up so the soil doesn't wash out at first. Yeah, a coffee filter would work too. Yep. Yeah.
You know what else works great in pots?
What's that?
You don't have metal screen?
What's that?
Drywall mesh that you buy at Lowe's that's got a sticky side to it. You can buy.
Yeah.
Or you buy the drywall mesh, it lasts forever. Stick it down, it's great screen.
That would work great. Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
just use like, yard dirt? My husband thought we could use yard dirt for everything. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But can you use it for the bottom if you have a?
For the bottom, you can. And even like leaf compost, like, Bart, what's the kind of gardening that is like real popular now where they do the debris on the bottom and then they build the soil up? Huckel. Yeah. You can do that in a pot, whatever that's called. But again, you've got to be conscious of changing the way the water table works in that pot, because creating the unevenness changes the way the water flows out. So, no, and that is, so the older I get, the more I believe in planting a pot where it sits. But sometimes using a hand truck or something like that would be the best way to get something moved around the garden that way. Or a high school kid. I still have one in my house. So. Yes.
It's a guideline as to how many plants per diameter.
There really isn't, because all the plants have different growing requirements. In a pot, I have always been one to cram, like I mentioned earlier. I do that because it looks good the day that you plant it, and then it looks good beyond that. And that allows you for a failure that can go unnoticed. If you have something crappy, you pull it out, all the other stuff grows around it. But for long term, if you're doing an evergreen in a pot, at some point, if you're going to leave it in there several years, you're going to run out of space around that root zone to plant. And that might be the time that you consider putting it out in the garden or root pruning it, refreshing the soil, and planting it all back. Yes, ma'am.
So those pots we saw that were on your deck, how big are they roughly?
So the one with the tulips in it, the diameter is about 12 inches, and it's about, say, 16 inches high. Mm-hmm. Yes,
Do you plant everything directly in the ceramic pots, or
I
do
do.
you use like plastic and pull things in?
I have done that, especially when I'm staging or if the pots can't stay where they're going. I'll use the lightest alternative. But slip pots are great, and that's something that as I start doing workshops in my new space, I'm going to offer porch pot workshops, and that'll be like a standard size pulp pot that'll just slide right down into your planter. And usually you can like add a little soil or moss to finish it off, but you can do either way.
Now, I've turned pots upside down, really tall, and then put
You can, definitely.
a lot of soil.
It is a lot of soil, but keep in mind that soil, again, if I have a really tall pot to fill, I'm likely to find another pot that needs fresh soil and use the old soil from that in the bottom of the big pot. Like I try to think how I'm going to get the best, for my best value for that. And you can use like mulch, and you could use Nature's Helper. That would be another really good one that's a lot less expensive than a potting soil. But you want to give your root zones of those plants a good, 16 or 18 inches to grow. Set them up for success, give them a root space that they can have. All right. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about Tsuga Springs Farm?
Yeah. So Tsuga Springs Farm is the name of the farm that New Leaf Garden Market was on. I'll tell you the name, how that we got the name. The name Tsuga is the genus for hemlock, okay? And when we looked at our land, and the first time we looked at it was 1998, we're tromping around this old cow pasture with grass head high, and down in this little hollow, it's all muddy, and there are a couple of trees. And so we hike in there, and we're looking around. And there is a mother hemlock tree who nothing left but about 30 foot of stump. But 3 of us could not put our hands around her. She was, and there was wildlife living in there. She had hemlock babies all around her growing, and there was a spring coming out right by her feet. So that's where Tsuga Springs Farm came from. And and when we went to New Leaf Garden Market, when we opened that, we decided we just operate under that name, because Tsuga is a mouthful and it takes an explanation like that. But it's our land. And so I have not decided what I'm calling what I'm doing yet. But so I am operating under Tsuga Springs Farm, which has been our corporate name for 15 years. And I have taken the old indoor space at the garden market and made it into kind of a garden art studio. As Joy mentioned, I went to the folk school and geeked out on basket making for a week, and that was great. And I'm going back in July because I liked it so much. But I've been making baskets. I'm continuing to make wreaths, and I have a couple weddings that I'm doing flowers for this summer. And then I hope to come out with a calendar in the next couple weeks of workshops that I'll do. Not every week, but once or twice a month. We'll have them at Tsuga Springs Farm in my old indoor shop space. Or we do on occasion, I have workshops at Cedar Mountain Outpost with them. We'll do like wine and wreaths or wine and pots. So you can keep up with, yeah, it's great. And that is such a fun time, and that's a great space to do a craft like that. So you could, if you followed Cedar Mountain Outpost on Instagram or Facebook, they announce those workshops that we do with them. And then Instagram for me, I will announce all the what I'm doing when I finally do it. Tsuga Springs Farm. Email or text me. I'll start a Facebook page pretty soon. I just haven't done it yet. But once I get it set up, it'll talk to both of them like my New Leaf page did. There are some stickers up here, and you need glasses to read the number and the email address, but it's on there. Help yourself. Thank you guys so much. Yeah.